They tell us lies that we're not good enough. They put thoughts in our minds that we should just give up. But I just put my gut suit on and I look up and I shine. Shine, shine, guitar.
Hello, greetings and welcome to our podcast where we dive deep into the dark side of reality, where the battle of good versus evil comes alive and everything you think you know about demons, demonic possession, and the eternal struggle for your soul is in question. Today we have an interesting program. We have a victim who is now claiming to have symptoms of demonic possession. Now I thought about this, the whole program scenario, and why not bring experts and have them on our panel to actually analyze and listen to the story of this individual. This individual is right now suffering from the symptoms that we acknowledge can very well be demonic possession, but we don't know, because sometimes these symptoms can also mimic mental illness. So we need experts, and we happen to have experts on hand. We have a doctor who happens to be a psychiatrist. He's a medical doctor who specializes in the mental health, and as a result, he's a wonderful man who is not only a specialist, but he also thinks outside the box. He's a psychiatrist who happens to be our he's a consultant for the Order of Exorcists. Yes, he's been with us, and he is also a very highly respected individual. His name is Dr. Sanjay Jain, MD. And I'm going to have him basically give a brief synopsis of his background. And then I'm going to ask him, if he would, to tell us and give us a brief history as to what he does and how he comes to the conclusion as to whether or not a person may or may not be possessed by some type of dark forces. Doctor, if you would.
Thank you, Bishop Ron, for such a good introduction. Thank you so much for that. And thank you for all the other guests on the program. So where do I start? No, first of all, I'll start with a very brief introduction about myself. So as Bishop Ron already mentioned, that I'm a psychiatrist. And first and foremost, I'm a man of science. I look at the evidence. So I've been practicing as a psychiatrist for about 18 years, which obviously include my training days in psychiatry. I've done my training predominantly in UK and Southern Ireland. Currently I'm a practicing psychogeriatrician, where my special interest is in predominantly dementias and the frontal lobe dementias, early onset and younger onset dementias. Now, the key thing is about a demonic possession or a mental disorder. Now, I always find really exciting to think outside the box sometimes, because you have to. As a psychiatrist, most of us would rely very heavy on what we normally use the term in mental health is the biopsychosocial approach. And a biopsychosocial approach means there can be biological causes, there can be social, or there can be psychological causes for somebody's mental suffering. But then there are the concept of, or the demonic possession, whether it's a mental illness or a true case of demonic possession require a very focused approach on whether it is a part of the biology or the neurobiology, or whether there are environmental causes. For example, people with the primary delusions, for example, delusion is intense false belief, where the person can believe that he or she is possessed by a demon or a spirit entity. Now, obviously, we have to go beyond the realm of the assessment in terms of ensuring that there are no other factors which may be contributing, or other variables which may be contributing to the person. Another example would be a person with the mania, for example, may be highly volatile, highly elated, very disinhibited, very grandiose. Grandiosity in terms of they may believe that they have a special power. They've been sent on this earth by God to drive out demons. Now, whether we are talking about God here in that person, or actually a psychopathology, or even far more interestingly, whether it is actually a real case of demonic possession. So each assessment has to be done on a case-by-case basis, because at the end of the day, the most important thing I believe in, that we need to put patient first, or the person first, to assess the background, to gather all the information which is in front of me, and to try to determine whether there is any genetic, biological, environmental, social, or psychological issues which is driving that person's behavior. Bizarre behavior, you can call it, or abnormal behavior, you can call it, or shouting, screaming, hallucinating, being deluded, or people can have a dissociative identity disorder, or whether the person has actually, we have ruled out all the what science can explain, but then we have to focus on the spiritual realm. And that's where I come in, because my faith in Christ has strengthened me in such a way that I'm able to look into each case individually and able to identify that, let's give a benefit of doubt to start with. And if that proves to be wrong, then we can move on gradually and swiftly towards the spirit side. Because those two, it's a very fine line, if I can say that, and I'm going to stop there, but quickly. It's a very fine line between a mental illness, a pathology, or actual demonic possession. So there are many factors which I highlighted just a few minutes ago that need to be taken into consideration. So with that note, I'll hand you back to Bishop Ron, and I hope that brief introduction would help listeners and our guest, anonymous guest, to understand where we come from.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Doctor. I like Sister Lucy. She's very intuitive. She's one of the most interesting persons I've met in a very long time. She's actually affiliated with us, and she is a wonderful person. And she also does assessments, and she is extremely active in our ministry. Sister Lucy, would you mind introducing yourself and telling us tell us about your assessments and what you actually do?
Good afternoon, Archbishop and the panel and our listeners, and thank you for having us on. So basically, I've had a childhood immersed in paranormal and demonic. I've had my own personal experiences, and I feel like I've been on a battleground my entire life. So I've learned a lot of things. I also have intuition, prophetic visions, which help us tremendously when we're working on cases. So our team here consists, we're in Ontario, Canada, and we cover a range between Southwest to Central. With Archbishop Plato and Angela, he debuted on the original episode of this podcast. He's highly skilled and Vatican trained and has numerous success stories as an exorcist. And when we work alongside him, Angela and I use our gifts. She also is intuitive. She also has visions and dreams. We see signs. Sometimes they're identical. Sometimes we provide the missing pieces to each other's visions, and then somehow they just all come together. And we find in collaboration that we work the best because we use our different skill sets. So, never would I ever say that, what we're seeing would override anything like a consult or, another area that needs to be looked at. So we definitely want to embrace everyone's skill set and collaborate. And that's how we work. So it's a very unique approach. We still follow a guideline. However, we're given clues to pursue a particular area in depth to investigate, because we like to get to the root of it. How's it coming in? And, we don't want to treat it superficially because it's not going to be successful in the long run. So while making a connection with the anonymous guests, Angela and I were hanging out this week, and then we just start getting impressions and we just get flooded with information. So, and that's what we do. And we just start writing it down, and it may not even make sense to us until we're discussing it. And then we'll say, oh, well, there was my missing piece, and we'll just put it all together. And sometimes we'll get confirmation.
Thank you so much, sister.
Thank
That's such valuable information, and a member of our organization, such as her, she is so valuable because she has that skill set that very few of us may not know or even be aware of. My next guest is very special as well. I should say Father John. He's from New York. This man has such an interesting ministry. I'm going to have him introduce himself. I'm going to have him also tell us about his ministry and also how he comes to making his assessments in regards to unusual behavior when there are individuals that may approach him and may have strange behavior, maybe even something that may mimic something that might even be demonic. I wonder, Father, if you could introduce yourself and please explain us as to what's going on in your world.
Thank you, Archbishop. Greetings, everyone, panel. My name is Father John. I'm in New York City, which I call New Babylon. Excuse me for that, but this is what I call New York City. I think New York City is a place that's very diverse, not just in cultures and not with ethnicities or races, but it's a world where it's conflicted, light and dark. And I've seen this and I experienced things in my life that brought me to this conclusion. One, first and foremost, in situations, I do not rule out anything. As a former paramedic in New York City, I assume everything, and then I do deductive reasoning. One thing is that we all do know that there is an existence of demons and malevolent spirits. In many religions, particularly more in Christianity, we see demons. We see them as fallen angels who have rebelled against God. And I do believe they do have power and possess influence over individuals, especially those who are broken. In my experience, what I actually do, one, I do not rule out anything. Two, I assess what I'm seeing. How is the environment that I'm at with a person seeking assistance? What is the spirit telling me? I base everything first and foremost on, I'm not a psychologist. I do have background in mental health. I will not pretend to be a psychologist. That's why we have our psychologists here, because everything's done in a team. Everyone has a certain skill set. And when the team works together and we collaborate, what happens is certain skill sets step in certain parts. Scripture even shows us that there's a season and a purpose for everything. So I will rely a lot on my team when it comes to different things that I may have missed. First, I'm looking at physical symptoms. I'm looking at when I come into an environment, if my collar alone as a priest creates some type of disturbance in the atmosphere. I'm looking at how this person behaves, how they move, how they speak. Then I go into this, when I continue my assessment, I go into a background of mental health. Does this person have a history of mental health? If they are on medications, what type of medications they are? What was the last time they went and visited or consulted with a psychiatrist or psychologist? I also look at legalism. A lot of people don't really understand how legalism works, especially in the world of the demonic. There's sometimes that we create portals that allow these entities to legally have ground in our lives, especially those who have suffered from violence, those who have a long history of drug addiction. I had an aunt many years ago that decided to play with a Ouija board with black candles. And little did she know, she took it as a joke. And that entity that followed her for many years will manifest until one day she walked into the church. And it was something that was unbelievable, because even as a child, that was the first time I experienced anything that was supernatural, and I was only 9 years old. The second time I ever witnessed anything was right after my mother's murder when I was 10 years old. She said 3 days before she died that death was there and death was going to take her. And 2 days after she died, things started moving in the house. And I believe, honestly, it was a message to tell us who her killer was. Eventually, we found her killer. But I believe it was a supernatural occurrence that led us there. Spiritual discernment. I believe that the closer that we find ourselves with God, the closer our intimate relationship with our Lord and Savior is, He begins to reveal things to us. It's like any relationship, any marriage. The longer you are with the person, the more you're involved, the more you engage with them, you begin to see more. And I do believe that's how God works. He may not draw out the map, but He gives you signs. He'll bring things to you. He'll give you the intuition. And I believe that's how the Spirit moves in us. I believe that when we call upon the Almighty, that things begin to reveal themselves. But when we assess, we have to take a lot of things in consideration, especially when it comes to mental health, because the simple fact is only 18% of the United States has been diagnosed with a mental health issue. And unfortunately, I mean, I'm a little bit on the fence on this, and I know our psychiatrists can speak better on it. Doctors do not tend to want to diagnose children with a mental health disorder. And rightfully so, because they're afraid they might create a stigma for the child, and they're afraid that they might hinder the child's progress when they go into adulthood. But I feel that if we don't diagnose these children who have suffered from adverse childhood experiences, who've endured traumatic events, then we really can't give them the help that they need. So when I walk into a situation, the first thing I'm going to assess is mental health. When this person is speaking to me, are they being rational? I'm looking to see if the atmosphere changes, especially when I pull out my Bible and I pull out my rosary. Those are the things that I look for when I do an assessment. And based on the consensus of the team, then I know how to move forward. But many times, based on the grounds of legalism, we're able to identify what the issue is. I'm looking for presence. That's my number one concern. Not that a person is inhabited, but just the presence of demonic interference. Thank you.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you, Father. Thank you for your involvement in this war, because we are at war. This battle between good versus evil is a real serious matter we are all involved in. And warriors such as yourself are in the front line, and we really need to have you continue your battle. Talk about a battle. Our next guest is a clergyman who has been in the ministry, and he's done lots of wonderful, wonderful work. He is a Bishop Dr. Joshua, who I would like to have him introduce himself, tell us a little bit about himself, and perhaps give us a brief synopsis of how he makes his assessments within his ministry, especially people who demonstrate peculiar behavior that might mimic signs of demonic possession, or might even maybe manifest some form of true demonic involvement. Bishop Dr. Joshua, how are you, and greetings?
I'm wonderful, Archbishop. Thank you for having me on today. You and I have been friends for a long time, and I want to thank the panel for being here with us today as well. A little bit about my background. I've been in ministry for 32 years. I serve as the Bishop of North America for the Reformed Old Catholic Church. I also work as a drug addiction mental health counselor, and I deal with a lot of things on a day-to-day basis. See a lot of clients who present signs of depression, disassociation, and dissociative disorders. We see a lot of people who have what we call dissociative amnesia, depersonalization disorders, and dissociative identity disorders. I deal a lot with people who suffer from paranoia and schizophrenia, who are very delusional in their thinking. We do a lot with post-traumatic stress disorder. And we know that that's not just war-related. That happens when people are involved in traumatic events or serious accidents or physical or sexual assaults, or it could be war-related. It could even be related to natural disasters. But mostly what we deal with when we're dealing with people who have suffered from drug addiction, we deal with people that battle with psychosis, such as delusions, hallucinations, confused thinking, and schizophrenia. And a lot of times, schizophrenia, and people who battle with schizophrenia, I have found, is just it's a proper diagnosis for some, but I have found that behind a lot of people who are diagnosed with schizophrenia, there are diabolical instances where people are being oppressed by the devil, not necessarily always possessed by the devil, but oppressed. And I was thinking, as everybody was talking, I was thinking of a scripture in Revelation chapter 18, verse 23. The Bible says that the light of a lamp will shine in you no more, and the voice of bridegroom and bride will be heard in you no more. For your merchants were the great ones of the earth, and all nations were deceived by your sorcery. Now that word sorcery comes from the Greek word pharmakeia, where we get the English word pharmacy. And I don't think it's strange that Mystery Babylon is somehow engulfed in this sorcery, this use of administering of drugs or poisoning of people. I think that Satan a lot of times uses drug possession to take over people's way of thinking, to take over people's life, because John 10:10 says the thief comes but not for to steal, kill, and to destroy. So, half of the population in America, 100+ million people, are on some form of drug, whether it be prescription medicine or whether it be people who illegally use drugs. Satan uses that in a diabolical way to try to control and manipulate people to do things that they ordinarily wouldn't do. Now, when we go in to do an assessment, I have a wonderful team that works with me. First and foremost, we ask the people that present to us claiming that they have demonic possession or oppression. Now, if it's more like an infestation, if they're seeing things happening in the home, we will go investigate at the home without asking these people to do any type of medical evaluation, because a lot of times people that present these types of cases to us could be people that are of sound mind and body, people, who are Christian people, or they may not even be religious at all, but people who are not showing any signs of psychosis or anything like that. However, if someone presents themselves to us and they claim to be possessed by the devil or oppressed by the devil, we ask them to have a medical examination by a medical doctor to rule out any type of physical anomalies that may be there presenting themselves. And then we have them do a psychological evaluation with a psychologist and a psychiatrist who is not, and I always stress this, not a Christian psychiatrist, not a Christian psychologist, but one who is strictly science and nature, that has no religious ties to church. I mean, they can be Christians, but or whatever religion they may be, but we ask them to go and seek the opinion of a professional. And once any type of psychosis is ruled out, then we go do a thorough investigation of the home. I have a gentleman who is a contractor, and he goes in and checks for any kind of black mold in the walls and underneath the floors, and if there's anything in the house that could be causing them to be sick for any reason. And we do a video of the home. We look in the home and see if there's any signs of satanic practice or witchcraft, Ouija boards, tarot cards, various books and things that would be doorways of opportunity for the devil to have a foothold in these people's lives. And then once we do all this investigation, one of the sisters, she's one of our deacons, she's one of my lead investigators, then she will write an assessment. And after that assessment is written, then I will forward it to Archbishop and then to Dr. Sanjay for their evaluation. And then we go from there. Then we allow the Lord to give us discernment to see whether or not it could be a true case of possession, because, working in mental health, I see a lot of things present themselves that could be or that may seem demonic in nature. And yet at times you can tell just by, and I'm a very hands-on type person. If I put my hands on somebody's shoulders, just greeting them, and I look in their eyes, and if they look away from me or they become fidgety, because, I always have my crucifix on and my rosary. If they become fidgety, and they all know at work that I'm a pastor, that I'm a bishop, and if they show signs of what I think would be possession or oppression, then I would further try to have this discussion on a more spiritual sense with them. But sometimes I think, though, in the mental health world, we prescribe medications for people that don't need medication. These people need deliverance from a spirit. But I don't make that assessment on my own. I thank God we've got our Archbishop. I thank God for Dr. Sanjay and for the wonderful team that we have to be able to make these assessments. Because if you go in and do an exorcism and it's not warranted, you could do more damage. You could cause psychosis. You could cause people to commit suicide. So it's very important that we be very careful, that we approach it not only from a spiritual matter, but from a scientific matter as well. Thank you, Archbishop.
Thank you so much, my friend. Wow, we have a wealth of information here. And more importantly, thank God we have all of these people who are on your side, who want to give you answers and who are available to help. Now, Sister Lucy, if you would, perhaps maybe you could give us the invitation, play the recording of the victim who is seeking advice. This would be a good time.
Okay, so I've been dealing with some demonic attacks. Not really sure how it started. It started it did start about 3 years ago. I was in my basement. I'm a DJ, and I was playing music, and it was just me in the home, and I kept hearing a whisper saying hi to me, which still does to this day. Started in 2021, and I'm playing music. I hear the hi, still hearing the hi, and I take off my earphones like as if maybe someone came in the house and talked to me or something, one of my family members. And so I kept hearing it, so I said, well, let me take my earphones off, let me get out of here. I was a little spooked out, and so I went up back upstairs. I'm going about my life, and I didn't really hear it too much, or wasn't paying attention, wasn't aware of it, not really sure. That was in 2021. And then I took a shower one day, and when I came out of the bathroom, there was writing on the mirror, and I had pictures of my children on the wall. and it specifically wrote out one of my children's names. And so I was a little spooked out about that, and I just, immediately wiped the mirror off, and I ignored it again. And when I came out the shower, I felt vibrations in my feet. And so I didn't really know what that was about. I thought maybe there was a shortage, in one of the wiring in the house on the floor or something. And I kept, feeling vibration. I said, man, I got to go get an electrician because, I'm feeling, like an electrical something under my feet. And so, 2021 went by, didn't happen again, didn't hear the voices again. 2022 came about around the same time of the year in 2022. Started feeling the vibrations under my feet, and I thought maybe I need to see a doctor. And so I was in college and I was in school, and doing one of my classes at home online. One of my children was in school. I had one of my children living with me, but they were in school, and so I'm on, online in classes, and I'm, on the computer, and, I just felt like I, kept looking from the corner of my eye, like as if I saw something, and something just kept directing my attention to the hallway. But I said, maybe I'm overreacting. And then, I said, well, there's a lot of commotion and confusion going on outside. And I said, let me put my earphones on because I can't really hear the audio in my classroom. So I put the earphones on, and my attention kept being directed toward the hallway. And it started that way. And then after class, probably around toward the evening time, maybe like a few days later, I was in the kitchen and I was washing dishes, preparing for supper. And I just kept hearing, a vague, like maybe it was in my head, I just kept getting these thoughts of someone saying something to me about my son, the one that it wrote the writing on the mirror about the first time. And it said something about my son, where's your son, something. I couldn't make out, but all I know is I just screamed from the top of my lungs, and I said, leave my son alone. Don't ask about him no more. Don't talk to him. Don't say nothing. Don't say nothing to me. Don't talk to me. And I said, in the name of Jesus. And then, everything was, seemed to be okay. Until I went to take a shower that evening. I was like, it's been all day. I didn't take a shower yet. Go take another shower. So, on the toilet, and I had the shower on, but I wasn't in the shower. And so when I got up, there was writing on the mirror again, saying, I like your son. The first time in 2021, I believe it said, where is your son? And then the second time it says, I like your son. So then, so I had the writing in the mirror first, in 2021 saying that I liked my son. It liked my son. Something like that was either I like my son or no, it said, where is your son? Because I talked about my son a lot in the house. And on the writing on the mirror, it said, where is your son? And it spelled out his name. And, I screamed at it. I'm like, don't worry about my son. Whatever this is, leave my son alone. Leave me alone. And everything was fine until 2022. I went to work as usual. Everything was fine. Didn't hear anything. No writing on the mirror, nothing. No presence. I didn't feel any presence or anything like that. So I go, take a shower, and I had the shower on, and, I was on the toilet. I got up, and it said, where is your son? Or something like that. It did it again. So I wiped the mirror off again, and I took a shower, got out. Nothing happened again until maybe November of 2022, close to Christmas time. So, my child is sitting in the room, and it's late in the evening, and I sitting in my room and watching television, and I feel a very strong presence, like it made itself known, very known. It was a very strong, thick presence that walked into my room, and I knew once I saw the once I was sitting on the bed, and it, I didn't really think too much of the presence until I saw an imprint get off of my bed right next to me, and as if it was laying next to me or sitting next to me. Like, you know how when someone sits on the bed, and if they're a big person, their imprint is going to come up once they get off the bed. So you can see the imprint off the bed. There was no one in the room but me. And so, I like immediately, called my son. I'm like, we got to get out of here. So I left the house. We stayed at the hotel. I thought that might have, sufficed the situation. But, even at the hotel, it felt like a very, a bunch of presences. Like, the room was just full of energy, like a lot of negative energy or energies. And as if it was like something guarding us. And, and I said, it was so bad, I couldn't even sleep. My son couldn't sleep. And so the next day I tried to, get out and go look for a new place. And I'm like, I got to get out of this house, thinking maybe that was going to do it. We ended up, coming back to the house. And we only stayed for another night. I couldn't stay. We left the house for actually 6 months. I stayed with relatives. And, while I was away, I, had my son stay, with his family on my other side of the family, and I stayed with my sister. And it seemed like all hell broke loose. I was at my sister's house, and I just felt like there was a lot of unseen things that was happening to me. I was being picked at. I started being poked at. It started pulling at my clothes. I started getting something touching my feet and pulling at my feet. And I went to go grab my Bible that my church gave me. They even came to pray at my house, but that didn't do anything. I had a priest come out and bless my house and sprinkle holy water, and nothing, that didn't change anything. It just seemed like it made things worse. And so while I was at my sister's house, I grabbed my Bible, I put it over my feet because my feet was being picked at the most. And when I sat my Bible down, the pages started flipping and it turned to Ephesians chapter 6. And I was like, oh my God, I said, I'm under spiritual warfare. That's the first thing that I realized that, for the extent of everything that had been going on over my life, and then I started hearing voices, manifesting the manifestation of the voices, became clearer, and it kept saying hi to me again. And then I would get picked on if I would ignore it. It was like, it was just letting me know, it was there, this voice who had been speaking to me for the past, 3 years going into 2023. And, my shirt was being picked on. Every time I tried to ignore the voices, I still would get picked on, pushed at, smacked on the butt. I even woke up to what seemed to be an entity having sex with me while I was asleep. And for somehow it made me, turn the heat up way high in my house to the point where I started sweating and took off my clothes and didn't realize that there was an actual entity there until I caught myself and I woke up and had my hands up in the air as if I was holding on to a person while having sex. And then I said, I need to put some clothes on. This is crazy. My sisters, they tried to pray over me. They kept commanding, because my sister's an evangelist, of a deliverance church, but, that didn't work. I kept putting the covers over my head because I kept getting picked at my head. And I would have to put blankets on me to try to protect my skin from getting, feeling the pain from being afflicted, by the pokes and the pulls and the stabs, and, different parts of my body and my legs were being attacked. And, I had a hat on my head, and, I was just holding myself to try to, to keep myself in defense from all of the attacks. And it was so bad that even till now, I could feel the presence when it's close to me in my face, and so after that, I had to go back home because my son had missed so much school. So we went back home in 2023, and this was in February. And so, I decided, I had the nerve to go back to the house. My son, who the entity had been calling his name out, actually needed a place to stay with him and his wife and his children. So they came to my house and stayed for a few months. And during that time, one day it happened again. And I was so angry, and, I was saying things. And, the first night my son had came there, he said, asked me, because they slept in my room, and he said, what side of the bed do you sleep on? Because I just had a horrible nightmare. He was talking to me the night before about how one of his friends was using drugs when they were growing up. He was talking about, some of his friends, and just reminiscing and going through memories and things like that. And he's never done cocaine. And the next morning, he said he had an awful night, wanted to know what side of the bed I slept on and what pillow I slept on, because he had a dream that he was using cocaine. And he's never had that dream before in his life. And so, this is when I started to mention to him about his name being written on the mirror, which he really didn't, believe in that stuff. Because, he believes in, what you put out into the universe, that's what you're going to get. And he doesn't believe in that. He feels like he puts out positivity. He doesn't understand why I'm going through what I'm going through. He felt as though that maybe I need to become more in tune with the universe and put the positive energy out there to try to stop these manifestations. So I said, okay. So they, mind you, they had been staying there day and night. Nothing happened after that until maybe about a month later. And I was taking a shower again, and I had my daughter-in-law, my son, his, kids, his oldest daughter, and something wrote on the, because I was very upset, and I said, I'm going to kill you, you demon. I'm going to, you're going to pay for this. And so everything I said to this demon, when I got out the shower, it wrote revenge with a smiley face on the mirror, and you're going to die. And we're going to see you die with a smiley face. I screamed and called my daughter-in-law, and she came in the bathroom. She's like, what in the hell is that? And I said, I don't know. I said, but this has been going on for a very long time. It's very inconsistent, but it's consistent enough where, and, we took a picture of it. We tried to capture it, so that I could try to see if I could get some help through, an agency that deals with, paranormal things. And, by the time I had captured enough information, my phone completely blinked. It completely stopped working on me, where I couldn't access my photos, my pictures. I couldn't even use it. I had to get a whole new phone. So, so I got a new phone, after after that happened, things calmed down for a little bit. And up to maybe going into the third month, when they were getting ready to move out, I didn't want them to leave, because I had still been under spiritual attacks, demonic attacks, where, I could feel the presence in my room. When they went into the room, I could see the curtains move back and forth, like something brushing up against the curtains. I had went to the store one evening, and my son's daughter, had, when I came back, she said, Grandma, can you do me a favor? Can you please light some sage and incense, which I had been doing? And I said, why? She said, well, because I went into the kitchen and I saw something move on the countertop, and I had a bunch of seasonings and spices on the countertop. And she told me that she saw it move from one place to the next. And I said, oh my God. I said, okay. So I started lighting sage, open up some windows, and it seemed like that just made things worse. They actually went to bed, and, I had been trying to get some type of assistance, paying people to come in and do, people who claim they can take away spirits and they could, deal with the demonic, and I ended up paying thousands of dollars to people who did nothing. And, which is really sad, because I really had faith in them, and I really felt like I needed the help at the time, and I didn't know where to turn to. And I just got ripped off by a lot of people. And so leading up to when my son, his family, they decided, they packed up and they moved away because of all of the experiences in the household. He couldn't work in the house. And so my other son came over to stay with me. And because I was afraid, like I would leave the doors open at night till wee hours in the morning because I couldn't sleep. And my grandson had been experiencing things that he was saying, that he saw demons in his room. and under his bed, and was scratching at it and pulling on the plastic on his bed. And he was having nightmares, and he was very young. He was having nightmares, and he had been also attacked through social media, where someone took his picture and put devil's horns on it and demanded money from him, and was showing making him show his private parts. So, you know, he was going through that part, and he also had been picked on and poked at, off and on during that time. And so my son had came over, you know, to try to, you know, to spend time with us, because he talks to psychics, and, you know, he always reaches out to them, and, you know, gets asked some questions about. He kept saying, I want to find out who did this to you. I think this is a curse that's put on you. One of my friends' fathers, one of my friends, my girlfriend's ex-boyfriend, you know, family does witchcraft, and I believe they did this to us, and, you know, did this to you, which I don't know how that has anything to do with me, because I don't know the people that he's talking about, and I had nothing to do with it. And so I know he came and told me that somebody's after us. You know, I kept seeing this van drive up and down my street. You know, I don't know who it was, you know, but I feel like, you know, maybe somebody was out to get us. And so I had to call the police one night, and then you know, the van disappeared. I had been driving up the street all day. So getting back to my son, he, you know, spent the night. I finally went into my room for the first time in several months. And I tried to sleep on the bed. He slept on the sofa. My grandson was in his room. He wakes me up at 3 o'clock in the morning and says he heard children running around the house. Now, I've heard that myself, but I was in denial, you know, because of the physical, spiritual attacks that I've already been dealing with the demonic attacks. I already heard those footsteps. I would hear them clear as day when I slept in the living room. I've been woken up by it. I've been woken up by the basement door is off the living room, and so is the kitchen. And I actually heard footsteps running up the stairs, the basement door, and knocking on the door, and then running back down the stairs to my old apartment, to my old house. And so when my son woke me up at 3 in the morning saying that he heard footsteps of little kids playing with him, it was right next to him while he was sleeping on the sofa, he told me he believed me now, because he didn't believe what I was telling him about the spiritual attacks or demonic attacks. And so he could not sleep that night. I couldn't sleep that night. And we stayed up till the wee hours of the morning. And actually, that was the day before I was to move out of my house. So we actually stayed up. We didn't, you know, go back to sleep. We started moving things out of the house. I was told to move things out in the daytime, don't move things out in the dark. I have been given a lot of advice about how to somewhat deal with this, you know, if there was anything cursed, any items cursed that, you know, I might want to try to get rid of. If I can look around the house and find an item that maybe someone had left, to try to get rid of it. So upon leaving the house, I had became homeless. I was told by a psychic that the entity or whatever entity wanted me homeless, and that's exactly what happened. I had no place to go. I was almost sleeping in my car, till one of my friends you know, allowed me to stay, and I had to, you know, leave my son with relatives. He missed like almost a half a year of school between the whole, you know, time we left prior to that, and then having to get kicked out of my place by the owners after that. So anywhere I would go, I would still be feeling this physical attacks, whether I'm in the bathroom. You know, my grandson, my son started feeling the attacks himself. He said he would go to school and he would be going to the bathroom, being pushed up against the wall. It was poking at him. It was pulling his hair. And I was also under attack, and I didn't know what to do. So I placed my grandson into a hospital, and children's hospital, where, you know, he was getting psychiatric treatment, and he was there for 3 weeks or so this year. And I was homeless. I ended up staying with the friend. I ended up staying with the friend, and I had been homeless, and my friend said, I wouldn't see you out on the streets like that. And so it was fortunate that that person let me stay. Actually, it was my partner, but at the same time, she knew what I was going through, and she felt the negative energy around me, and she did not want to be a part of that. I actually lost my partner behind that, and I ended up going back to my sister's house, and I stayed with my sister for a few days this year. It was just so hard, difficult. It was like I had a blockage in my life. Everything was being blocked. When I tried to do good, when I lost my job, everything started happening. I lost my home, I lost my job. I almost lost my grandson, custody of him. It's just, my son turned against me. And when I was staying at his house last November, I was telling him about the same son that was at my house that spent the night that said he heard the footsteps. We ended up staying with him, and he kept telling me he felt the covers being pulled off of him and something was speaking to him. And then he told me, well, you got to leave. So we ended up leaving, and he put us out, and we had no place to go. So when my grandson started getting attacked and saying that he was having thoughts of suicide, that the demons were telling him to kill himself, I put him into a children's hospital. And when he stayed there, I had a priest go out to pray for him. I tried to do as much as I can to reach out to the Catholic community, so to try to get someone to help us. Still didn't find the help that we need, and I'm not quite there yet, even though people are reaching out to me, but we're not there yet. So I hadn't talked to my son in a while because he ended up, calling Child Protective Services on me because I decided to put my grandson in the hospital. And, it was just a real difficult time for me. It was a struggle to find the house. And, when I find one, they'll take back the offer. And that happened 3 times in a row. And I lost 2 phones. Mysteriously, they just both blanked out. I had no access to contacts. I had no access, no phone numbers, no emails. I lost my email contact information, didn't have the passwords. They were all on my phone. And along with the pictures that I took of the writing on the mirror, that just all happened to disappear. I couldn't have access to them. So my son calls me after the new year of this year, and he actually calls my grandson, his son, and says to me he needs to talk to me because it's happening to him. He left a message on my voicemail, and he says, Mom, I'm really sorry. I didn't believe you, but I'm hearing the voices, and he happened to take the furniture because I wanted to get rid of everything when I left that house. So they ended up taking my bed, my furniture, my kids, they took my stuff. And he said it started happening after he took my sofa, the one that I was sleeping on during the whole time that my other son was there in the house, in the old house. So he said that he's been, these thoughts, it keeps coming into his head, telling him things, telling him he's going to go to jail, telling him he's going to get arrested, telling him that bad things are going to happen to him, and he could not sleep. This is my middle son. I have 3. And my middle son was the one that was telling me that, he's been hearing voices, and everywhere he go, it follows him. My grandson, since coming out the hospital, have not been under physical attacks, but he tells me that he's worried. He still has nightmares. He's still feeling like he's being followed. And, right now I'm just, up until today, I'm still going through the physical attacks. Every time, I read anything, I read the 91st Psalms, I read the Litany, I read the Hail Mary, I read the Our Father. I had stopped all entertainment, as a DJ and as, watching television. I had limited that to a 30-day fast, and it did nothing, for me. The prayers, minimizes the attacks, but the attacks, is still present to this day. And I just need some help. If I could get help out here to help me and my family. If anybody out there knows anyone that can help us, I would appreciate it.
Well, that was certainly interesting. This person, I believe, has given us a lot of issues to talk about. Now, we only have like 10 minutes each to give our brief synopsis in regards to what our impressions are. So I'm going to start with our doctor, and then each of us will give an opinion, and then in regards to what our impressions are. Doctor, let's start with you.
Hi, Bishop Ron. Thank you. And that was indeed a very interesting, the facts he shared. Or is it she you said, Sister Lucy? Sorry, apologies. And there are so many variables in the whole picture there. So look, I'll be very honest, as a psychiatrist, it's very difficult to ascertain. There are many key questions which I have for our guest, and those questions obviously I like to know his bit of more background, his age, what job, the occupation, married life, and how old are the children, etc. But certainly, I also like to explore some of the social aspects of the presentation. Also, there are so many key things, but again, the kind of things he's explaining, the guest is explaining, is it seems like that it surrounds. One can call it more paranormal, whether he's experiencing panic attacks or whether there are any other. It's a sudden onset of what we normally call it psychotic symptoms. So if I have to think about schizophrenia, I'm not saying that that it is schizophrenia. I'm not gonna, please don't get me wrong on that, but your mind start to think in a differential diagnosis way. What could be going on there? What could be possibly wrong? So we know that there are auditory hallucinations there. We know that there are some, most of the auditory hallucination, whether it's second person or a third person auditory hallucination, the person is coming under attack from the so-called entity. And the other aspects of the history I would be very keen on is when he became homeless. What happened at that time, during that period of time, whether it was on the streets or he did. There was a mention that staying with a friend, but is there any history of any substance use? Things like that. So it's, I mean, from a psychiatrist point of view, from a mental health point of view, I would really like to explore the whole dimension of psychosocial, biological aspects of the presentation. Why all of a sudden the symptoms started in 2020, if I'm not wrong, or 2021. Then it happened in 2022. Then feeling of the vibrations under the feet. Then now the entity is apparently going after the children as well, and a son can also feel the attack. So there are so many things. I mean, it's very difficult for me to say, Bishop Ron, if I'm very honest with you, on this assessment. I would be happy to potentially, outside the air, off the air, I should be happy to receive a little bit more comprehensive assessment of this case for be able to come to some sort of conclusion.
Yes, it's interesting. When I do my assessments, I basically look at three different factors. I look at one would be, of course, the mental changes. The second would be the physical condition of the individual. And, of course, the third would be the outward manifestations. And then I would look at the individual. There's so many factors involved here in regards to what this person was basically telling us. To me, it's important to have a background history of the individual. We need to know basically if there ever been any psychological issues involved in the past, any history of drug use, other factors involved. And then, of course, if there are outside manifestations in a supernatural realm, then we have to also make sure that there are things that cannot be explained and rule out all the things that can be explained. The vibrations under the feet can be explained by the house itself, maybe the way it was manufactured. Maybe it's a mobile home. Maybe there are other factors involved. Or maybe it is a supernatural event. If it is, then we would have to approach it from a scientific point of view and then rule out all the natural elements. So anyway, that's another issue. In regards to hearing voices, that could also be a schizophrenic. It could also be other things that could be of a health issue. There could be other things that could be very important factors that could that we would have to take into consideration. And then, mention other things, that took place in regards to sleep, having sexual episodes as this person slept. There could be a number of things that may be going on. So it's really, really hard to give a summary, but we could take guesses, of course. I'm going to go to Sister Lucy. Sister Lucy, what are your impressions?
Okay, so most certainly this would be based on the initial story because we haven't investigated this fully. But how we would proceed then, we would be interviewing the members of the family, especially the sons, because we feel that they would be pertinent in this case. Also, we would be doing our walkthrough, but we're not there physically. We have done video footage through the house before and been able to pick up things through that, as well as photographs. But just based on the initial story, so far what Angela and I had received, and I already described, our process, the way Angela and I work. So the first thing that we saw was that there are some aggressive, intrusive, and implanted thoughts. Also, we see hands that are grasping at the lips that are like trying to pry them open, which leads us to wonder if there are occasions where she feels like they're speaking through her. Sometimes if she's talking, if there really aren't her words. Now this could have happened or that the attempt is there. We do feel and sense that there is demonic and earthbound spirit presence. Earthbounds that are attached to the land that perhaps may have been farmland at some point. So if an exorcist were to take this case on, our recommendation would be the releasing of the earthbounds, the clearing of the land, in addition to an exorcism and taking care of the house and the land. Most definitely, we see that there's this battle of good versus evil because we see that there's this love of Christ. However, there's also this darkness that kind of looms in and tries to consume her. So Angela and I, we have this conversation all the time. We see it in clients where we see this tug of war. And it's basically where the rope just gets pulled in opposing directions back and forth many times, and it's just repeated. Clients report to us often that the voices tell them that their prayers are futile. They even repeat their prayers and go so far as to mock in the hopes the client ceases praying. On the contrary, this is a time where they need to pray even more fervently, frequently, and unceasingly. The entity is feeding on the reactions, on the fear, on the anger, which ensues in the incidents she described, such as the mirror writing. And they know how to find one's weaknesses or vulnerabilities. No surprise, these spirits make their presence known while one is using the bathroom. Also, they would know that to a mother, the mention of their children would be unsettling and invokes fear and worry naturally. There are many things which need to be considered here, as Dr. Sanjay had mentioned, and Archbishop Ron. I would also suggest that she would go and have a medical checkup, because she did mention she had issues with her eyes and with her feet. Also the mental, right, such as professionals such as Dr. Sanjay. Also, there are social aspects here, and we talked about that as well. With if there, because I don't want to get into it because we've already discussed it. But, with the possible drug use, if that's the case. Also, there could be trauma involved, emotional stress, family attacks, family discord, perhaps counseling. So there's just so many layers, and this makes it even more complicated because it goes far beyond paranormal and supernatural too. Though we know that we can't resolve this in the frame of a podcast, so what we can do is just provide some direction, some insight, or perhaps on how to proceed. Also, yeah, so we talked about the physical. Also, another consideration is, would the family members even be willing to be interviewed? Would they be willing to change their lifestyle if that was the root of the problem? We find sometimes that people aren't willing to make the changes. And if that's the case, then, the root of the problem, can't be solved. So there's no really conclusive report here, but it's merely just the beginning of what we would start doing, and we would start a dialogue and start to cover those areas where we're feeling pulled to. So Angela and I did gather much more information than this. So if anyone would be interested in taking this on as an exorcist, our team is currently on a case, and we have several waitings, and it's outside of our jurisdiction, actually. So if anyone is interested in taking this on, any of our listeners, any of the exorcists in the order, that we would be willing to put together a report for what we had found. And if that would help you out, then we'd be willing to do that. This particular guest, she is anonymous, though she did give her location. If anyone was willing to reach out to her, if you are in the New York, New Jersey, or surrounding area, please reach out to us and let us know if you can help.
Okay, that's excellent. Thank you, Sister Lucy. That was really great. I'd like to have Bishop Joshua come on and give us a brief synopsis as to his impressions and recommendations. Bishop?
Thank you, Archbishop. And it's, again, an honor to be on this panel discussion with all of you wonderful people of God. Normally, when you hear of people that have experienced such traumatic events, normally my brain automatically goes to some form of psychosis, which people affected by psychosis, as I said earlier, can experience delusions, hallucinations, and confused thinking. And psychosis it presents itself in a plethora of mental illnesses, drug-induced psychosis, schizophrenia, mood disorders, schizophrenia being the complex psychotic disorder that brings disruptions to thinking and emotions and a distorted perception of reality. However, when it involves other people besides the person presenting these issues, I tend to go outside of the scientific spectrum, if you will, and I tend to look at the supernatural side of things. There are different, when we talk in terms of different types of possessions, there's possession, oppression, there's obsession. Diabolical possession is a full-blown demonic possession. It's when Satan or an entity takes full possession of the body, speaks and acts without the knowledge or consent of the victim, who's morally blameless. A lot of times, some of the signs could be, of course, we've talked about this before, speaking in tongues, extraordinary strength, revealing the unknown. A prime example is the man of the Gerasene, the demoniac, who they tried to bind in chains, and he had such strength that he would break the chains, and he was out of his mind, and Jesus delivered him from that spirit, that legion, over 1,000 spirits in that one particular man. So really, you can't fix a set model for possession. That'd be a mistake, I believe. But it's also a mistake just to look at it from a scientific view, and I believe we need to approach that first That has to be number one. There needs to be a physical examination by a doctor. There needs to be a psychological evaluation by a psychiatrist. And the reason I say psychiatrist and psychologist, because a psychiatrist has the medical doctor background that could be able to prescribe medication if such things are warranted, if it's not demonic and they do need something to help level out the chemical imbalances in their brain. There's diabolical oppressions. And diabolical oppressions, some examples of that is like Job's boils or Paul's thorn in his flesh. And the symptoms vary from serious to mild. And there's not a possession or a lack of consciousness or involuntary action, but the Bible, gives us many examples of this type of oppression. One being Job. He wasn't possessed, but he lost his children, his goods, his health. Remember the woman that was bent over, who Christ healed and claimed that she had had a spirit for 18 years. We hear about the deaf and the dumb man who were cured by Jesus, who wasn't subject to total possession, but there was a demonic presence that caused this discomfort physically. And we know St. Paul wasn't possessed by a demon, but he had a demonic oppression that caused an evil affliction. So, we have to weigh all these things out, looking at it from the scientific and the supernatural. An oppression, a demonic oppression, happens a lot of times. I've seen in people's lives and dealing with people who have such things take place in their lives. Oppression from spirits. Those of us that are involved in the exorcist ministry, we a lot of times are attacked by demonic oppression. We have things that are thrown at us. We're attacked in our health, our jobs, our relationships. We're attacked in our finances. We're attacked in our ministries. We're attacked, it seems like, in every facet to try to stop us from doing what God has called us to do. There's also what's called diabolical obsession. And it's different from demonic obsession with mental illness a lot of times, but a lot of times it can be the same. The symptoms are like sudden attacks, ongoing attacks, obsessive thoughts, things that are rationally absurd, like victims unable to free themselves. The obsessed person lives in a perpetual state of prostration, desperation. It could even lead them to suicide. Their dreams are influenced. Some people, claim automatically this is evidence of mental illness requiring the service of a psychiatrist or a therapist. But it could also be demonic phenomena. So there's also diabolical infestations where houses are affected, things or animals. And then there's diabolical subjugation or diabolical dependence. There's also perfect possession. A diabolical subjugation is where people fall into a form of evil they voluntarily submit to. These can be like blood pacts with the devil, consecration to Satan. It can be generational curses, something that's been handed down from father to son for hundreds of years. Really, with the limited information we've been given, it's hard to make a proper assessment. But my first recommendation would be seek a medical doctor. See if there's any medical issues going on. Vibrations in the feet could be nerve damage. It could be spinal damage. It could be something to do with the heart. It could be something to do with blockages. They'd seek the professional help of a psychiatrist or psychologist to give a mental health evaluation to make sure there's nothing psychosis going on in the brain and there's no chemical imbalances. And then after that, then I think that we need to pursue doing what we can to help this person, because obviously there's some kind of an attack, and obviously it's not mass hysteria. It's not them imagining it, and you can't a lot of times place your imaginations on other people. And of course, the caller was talking about the writing being on the mirror and seeing the name of her son and vice versa. And all these things could happen. It could be psychosis, but when other people see it and other people experience it that are involved, it sounds to me like it is more demonic in nature. I can't make that assessment without knowing any more details. But I think that once we further know more details, we can make a better assessment and a better judgment based on that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, I'm going to have Dr. Sanjay come on, and he has some additional things that he would like to add. Doctor, are you there?
Yes, I'm still here, and thank you, Bishop John, Bishop
Sure.
Ron. Sorry, apologies, it's just me. So there were quite a few points which occurred to me after I first spoke, and of course, this particular case need a full evaluation. Now, some of the points I would like to point out, and I'm going to keep it very short and succinct. That is there any family history of mental health issues? Because for me, her presentation has been quite sudden, if I'm not wrong, and gradually it has it worsened, and then the sudden onset obviously sometimes put doubt in my mind as a man of science, whether it is pathological or demonic. Then another point to pick upon would be what are the family dynamics? What were her upbringing like, going back into the childhood, teenage years, historical facts, her attachment type, whether she had a secure attachment with her parents, siblings, insecure attachment, because quite a number of times people with their insecure attachments can start to dissociate, or when they get into adulthood, they start to have experience, they start to either externalize their symptoms or internalize the symptoms, if you get what I'm saying. And so those factors are quite important, how our attachment things like. I think one of the things I'd like to also know, after we have done all the psychological evaluation, she does need to be seen by a medic. I would 100% agree with that. Whether there is any history of drug use or any abuse in the past. But again, there are, as I said, as everybody else has said, that there are so many variables in this case. It could very well be a genuine case where scientifically we have tried to determine and nothing can be found. But again, hey, I mean, there are many psychiatric conditions where what we normally call it the etiology of the condition is not known. So you know what I'm saying? So it's so many domains there. And I'll be more than happy to look into this case specifically once the evaluations are done and provide my further input. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Doctor. You've done so much for just even volunteering and just being here. We appreciate you so much and your dedication. We praise you and we thank you. Now, talking about a wonderful person that has joined us, Father John, tell us what your assessment would be in regards to this case. And of course, we understand that it's very hard to give an assessment over the phone. Or just to hear the assessment, but in the same token, based on your impression, your discernment, what do you feel and what would you recommend?
Thanks, Archbishop. I mean, all of our colleagues here brought great insight, valuable insight. I will say there's a lot of variables here. There's a couple of steps that our dear panel here had suggested, which I think is a great approach. First, I would love to go visit the location, to have the family interviewed, if they were willing to get their perspective. And further on, once psychiatric evaluation is done, a medical examination is done, and we have all the reports and supporting documentation, then I will move on and start considering legalism. And the reason why I'm considering it is And like Bishop just stated a few minutes ago, for some reason, I don't know why generational curses is calling out to me. I would want to know the person's childhood experiences. I want to know what was their faith aligned to, what was their faith persuasion, if the family were practicing Christians or not, or whatever denomination. I would like to know what was their relationship with God, because some things here kind of stood out to me. The sense of ownership, declaring possession of the child, so to speak, saying, I like him, I want him. That is very bold. I mean, to my understanding, from what I heard, there was several people of faith who visited, and this entity seemed to be very strong, which would lead me to the concept of possibly generational curses. As we know, blood is life. And during biblical times, we sacrificed animals. And I still believe that blood is life. So sometimes we find entities that pass through bloodlines. It's not necessarily that a location is haunted. Sometimes it's the family that's haunted. In conclusion, assessing for demonic presence is truly a delicate process. And it does require a combination of physical, psychological, or spiritual evaluations. The one thing I have to give credit to the church is that even back in biblical times, they knew that these concepts of psychology, physiology, and spiritual evaluation was a key component to combat darkness. But by understanding the signs and symptoms of possession, infestation, obsession, and seeking appropriate evaluation is the only way we're going to be able to really look into this case. I'm willing to jump in there with Dr. Sanjay, whatever I could do to help out. I do get a lot of calls, a lot of it. Some of these things just go away with simple prayer and declaration. After baptism, sacraments, I've seen things just clear up. So these are many things I have to look at. In addition, going back to what I said earlier, I need to know the family dynamics and the history. I think that will really begin to highlight and really clear the path for us to understand what is really happening here. Some things stick out, which bring me to possible psychosis, but I would not completely rule out that this is not some form of legalism, and I'm not going to rule out this may not be a generational curse. It's a lot of variables to consider, but one thing I will say this. If a homeless person is walking through a gated community and finds an empty house, he will seek refuge from the elements of the world, from rain, snow, from the frigid air. So if the house is empty, and what I mean by the house is empty, if they live a life that is not full of Christ, a life full of prayer, then their house is empty. And if that house is empty, you best to believe that anything that's homeless is going to seek refuge. That's why it's important that we bring Christ into our lives, because as Christians, we do have the power because the blood still works. But in my position, I would definitely say all the panelists brought something great to the table. Definitely want to sit down with their family, see if they're interested in giving me their version. Because one thing is certain, what my truth is and your truth may vary. But the facts of the matter is I will have to go based on the data. And the family is the one that has the data. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank every one of you who are listening, every one of our panelists, and everyone who may need help and who may want to come to us. Our website is www.orderofexorcist.com. If you are seeking help, by all means, get in touch with us. Get in touch with Sister Lucy. Let us know that you are in need, and we will try to get some kind of help to you. Again, this is going to be a monthly podcast, and hopefully we'll be able to help you, Lord willing. Take care, and we're going to sign off now. So take care. God bless you all.